Hello, everyone. Welcome to Health 180 with Carrie and Fenn on Rogers TV. My guest today is Jake Farr, president of PFLAG Canada Durham Region, here to talk about the COVID-19 impact on the 2SLGBTQI community. We want to help you learn more, so let's learn together. Jake, welcome back to our show.
Thank you very much for having me.
For those who may not recognize you, just give us a little bit about Jake Farr.
Great. I don't think a lot of people recognize me. So so my name is Jake Farr and I use pronouns of he and they. I am a registered social worker. And so part of that work comes in, I'm a counselor to many folks here in the Durham region and outside the Durham region. And I consider myself a community advocate to try to bring better healthcare for the 2SLGBTQI community to Durham. And sit on lots of committees. And as well, like you said, I am the current president of PFLAG Canada Durham Region.
Tell us about the work you are currently doing at PFLAG to address the needs of your community during this pandemic.
Yeah, thanks. So, the pandemic has been hard on everyone. And so particularly for us as our work at PFLAG, so PFLAG is like a big resource place for support for people in the 2SLGBTQI community. And so we had to change just like everybody else. We used to have in-person meetings and now we are currently online as you and I are doing right now, still offering support. During the pandemic, we also offered some financial support to our community as well for those who were affected by the pandemic, losing their jobs, and being in certain situations that they couldn't exit from. So that's kind of how our program done. And then we really started to ramp up our education series to help organizations understand the community better. And then as well, we started to engage in more social activities online for the community to attend.
Mm-hmm. What are members of the community saying about the COVID-19? Do they believe it's real? How do they feel about it?
Yeah, you know what? I think overall, I mean, when we look at it, the community is going to have probably the same or similar dynamics of any a community. I mean, looking at intersectionalities, there's going to be the same level. So, there's going to be those who believe it, those who don't believe it, those who take it seriously, those who, are not taking it seriously, those who are hesitant around it because of medical backgrounds, and so when we look at the intersectionalities of a current study that was done by EGAL, those folks who identify as BIPOC and queer, they have a much higher hesitancy in order to engage in medical health care in order to get the vaccines. So I think overall, though, there's kind of a general sort of, I think, same as anybody else who isn't from the community in regards to their beliefs or non-beliefs.
So COVID-19 has been hard on all of us. What type of impact are you seeing?
Yeah, so our community, we see different impact. I mean, slightly maybe different. We have a lot of folks who are isolated at home with maybe family who are homophobic, transphobic, biphobic. And so now they're stuck in a place. And then, maybe before where there was some space for them to find alternative housing, a lot of that was shut down during the pandemic. People weren't moving out of housing, like supportive housing. And so people became very isolated and maybe in spaces that weren't very healthy for them. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit dynamically different than, maybe say what we would call the non-queer community. And we see a little bit higher proportion rate of unemployment within the community because oftentimes those in the community are at a higher rate of being in jobs that are under about $20,000 a year. There's about a 41% rate, whereas non-queer people is like 26% being under 20,000. So they're in the lower income range, which means they're going to have a higher propensity to be in those jobs that are front facing, which means they have more chances of becoming, COVID positive.
So how have you been coping with the protocols?
Well, for me personally, this is what I do now. So I had to give up my office. And so I had to switch over to counseling over Zoom or by telephone, and groups. We run all our groups by that. So it's about, understanding and how to how do we make the Zoom work and how do we keep people engaged and all those kind of things. And so, that's been tricky, but it's been okay because in all this side of it, we've actually been able to engage people outside of our typical area of support. So, we actually have people coming from all kinds of parts of Durham that maybe normally couldn't come to our meetings in South Durham. Now we've engaged North Durham and we've engaged people from outside of the Durham area. So I think there's a little bit of positivity around that.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in regards to individuals and being apart from their loved ones, because I think it's important to be surrounded by people who understand what you're going through, and especially in your community, it's so crucial to have that type of support. Tell us about what you've been hearing.
Yeah, so again, a little bit of uniqueness that comes from the Pride community is that oftentimes when people are at home, they are the only one in the home that maybe identifies in the community. So when we look at different sorts of family dynamics, there are spaces where they come home and they've had a bad day or something's been said to them. Their parents can relate to them and can be like, great, we'll help you with that. And so from people who are in the 2SLGBTQI community, they may be the only one in the home who identifies in that community. And so there's a bit of bit of isolation oftentimes. And so when they can't reach out and they can't see their friends, they can't come to community events. And some of them, have their loved one or loved ones out in the community, and they can't access them, right? And so they can't even find maybe even a private space in their home to be able to talk to them. So huge impact of that area. I think we're seeing a lot of high isolation feelings, and mental health is quite increased over the last year.
Mm-hmm. So I've been to one Pride Month, actually, downtown Toronto. It was a really amazing experience. I'm assuming, what happened this year for Pride Month? What took place? Was there a parade?
Yeah, so it depends. So here in Durham, we have our own Pride Durham, which is the first week in June. And so we went online. I mean, PFLAG did we presented Rocky Horror Picture Show. People came and they sang and they danced and we had prizes. And then there was a multi-faith, and then there was other programs that went on during the week that were, again, all virtual this time. So that's what we did here in Durham. Toronto did. They had their parade, their things online as well. So again, it was all online. There was a few marches that happened in person, which historically, I mean, that's what we're about. That's what those marches were about. It was about resistance and that, not about the pretty pride parade. But it really took a step back, which again, really hard 2 years in a row for people not to be able to go and be around people they feel comfortable with and see everything and be able to celebrate. So a little bit of a challenge, but there was some stuff that happened for sure.
Were there any adjustments done to celebrate Pride Month this year that you think could be beneficial moving forward?
Yeah, I think we're learning. So of course people want to be together and want to celebrate together, but oftentimes there's other people they can't make it, for whatever reasons, maybe mental health, maybe being in a crowd is really difficult. So you know what, in one way, it's kind of we're learning, how can we kind of combine this going forward? How do we help, those folks who really can't make it out to these events, but they want to be there? So I think our learning process is around how are we going to combine this moving forward, right? Having some in-person, but also being able to use technology to be able to make it accessible to a lot of people who can't make it. Thinking even youth whose parents may not drive them or may not be able to access it. So it's quite a new thing for us of how we can take what we've been learning and then put it back with what we used to do.
Did COVID-19 bring forth any new challenges or barriers within the community? And if so, give us a few.
Yeah, I mean, again, without schools kind of being in and out, and some people being online, and some people, whatever, there was no way to access sometimes support groups there, or like, and there's some designated support groups in the high schools, those kind of things. So there was lack of that. Then also as well, I mean, there's folks in our community who, for some may not, they may not understand, and that's not where I'm at, but I'm just saying there's people who are part of polycules or polyamorous relationships, which means, they're in relationships with many people, and, they can't get to, because of our COVID lockdowns and all the restrictions, they either had to pick and choose or see no one from their circle. And that was very difficult for many of those folks because they were really isolated from those that they love. So that was a unique feature, I think, that that was brought forward.
Do you know anyone in your community who caught COVID-19?
Yeah, I know some folks that that were exposed, youth and a little bit older as well. Yeah, there's been some.
How did social distancing and isolation measure impact young people?
Yeah, again, same thing. Like, listen, our young folks, they want to be out. They want to be with their friends. They don't want to be at home with their parents, whether they're from our community or not. Honestly, they're done with us as parents. So, I mean, they want to go out. They want to have fun. And so, again, but because of restrictions, they couldn't go out. Some parents were, very strict around that. Like, no, you can't even go out and social distance outside. So, again, lack of community, lack of being able to be out with other people who are maybe experiencing similar sort of like, even questioning, like, part of who they are growing up in their teen years. Very hard for them to navigate that, right? Because we all think that they're always on their texts and yeah, but they get tired of it too, that they're actually crying out for like, I just need to see my friends. So I think there's been a huge space in there that there's been a gap for an isolation for our teens.
My neighbor said to me, he goes, I don't know what you're doing, but your son is always home. My son goes out like so often, right? Yeah, I was lucky in that sense where my son wasn't running about, But I think too, he did it too because of the fact that I'm in the vulnerable population, so he needed to ensure that I'm safe, right?
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing to go through, and I'm sure many of us feel that challenge. What's one thing you can say to your community about following the COVID-19 health guidance?
I think, in this space, we don't need to divide the community in the sense of like, them versus us. I think for us, it's like the same thing. It's like, listen to the health officials, although, it's been a little confusing. I mean, I think we have to take that it's been developing. We're learning about this, this virus as it goes through the works. And I think listening to them, I think what it is how do we help support them through their lack of trust sometimes around the medical profession because of previous interactions, right? So it's, again, listening to what's being said about the vaccines from the people who understand this, and try to engage in getting those vaccines so you don't get sick.
Yes, it's so important. You're watching Health 180 with Carrie and Fan on Rogers TV. We're talking to Jake Farr, President of PFLAG Canada Durham Region, about the impact of COVID-19 on the 2SLGBTQI community. We will be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Think it's too late to become more fit? Think again. I'm personal trainer Karen Ross, specializing in 55+ fitness. My mission is to help you find your way back to health and wellness. I'll give you the knowledge and the power to take control of your own fitness path. Everyone deserves quality of life for their entire life. Tune into A Little Bit Fit with me, Karen Ross, here on Rogers TV.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Health 180 with Carrie and Fan on Rogers TV. We are talking to Jake Farr from PFLAG Canada Durham Region about the impact on COVID-19 on the 2SLGBTQI community. Jake Farr, welcome back.
Thank you.
Do you think COVID has exposed any of the hardships that the 2SLGBTQI community faces?
I think it further heightens the isolation portion. So like even, non-pandemic times, there's always a significant amount of isolation for the community and feeling isolated. And so I think this pandemic has really brought that forward, understanding where supports need to be in place and where they're not in place fully. So because there was a lot of things that were working, and then once the pandemic hit, they kind of went away, and they never it'll be interesting to see whether they come back, right? So I think we've really seen the isolation portion is a huge thing. Again, thinking about people living in homes that they're not even accepted, maybe they're not even out in their home. I think that's highlighted a huge amount during this pandemic.
What programs are in place to address the isolation caused by COVID-19?
Yeah, so people like Durham Region, we always have lots of support groups. So we do still currently have some support groups. We have what we call sharing nights or coffee nights. So we run those 3 times a month, and that's where anybody who's part of the community or an ally to the community can come in. They can, if they're having some difficulties, they can talk about it, and they can get some peer feedback or support, or maybe they have a question that they want to ask. They can come and do that. We run them like 3 times a month. We also have a called a transitions group. So this is for folks who identify as trans or contemplating whether they are trans or exploring. And we run that twice a month. Again, they can get a hold of us at PFLAG, and we give them the Zoom link because we keep that private to keep people safe. And they can come on and do that. We had a few other groups, but actually, even within ourselves, we had some people running some groups for us who were frontline workers who had to take a step back because they just didn't have that energy to do the group. So we're going to be revamping some of those. Again, what I said, we had a craft night, we had like an education night, we're having some different things coming up. So we also continue our social media. We are fully on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and we have our website that's interactive. So, we're really trying to support people in that way. We still offer peer-to-peer support. So when people email us and say, oh, maybe my youth or my partner, they're having this thing going on, I need to speak to somebody. We're still offering those sort of services. And as well, we're gearing up for camp right now.
You've always been a great support to the community, and several times I had to call you for individuals who need some help before they get to the programs that they need to get to. And it's always wonderful to be able to, call on you, to help out. You've always been great that way. So I know the programs that, you're involved with are great. Let's talk a little about vaccines. Are members of your community getting vaccinated?
Yeah, again, I can't speak for everybody because I don't know. Just only from a pretty recent research by EGAL Canada around the 2SLGBTQI community, there seems to be similar rates of wanting to get vaccinated, those kind of things. I think there's still some hesitancy again with thinking about intersectionality between folks who identify in the 2SLGBTQI community and have intersectionalities, being, a person of color, maybe a new person to Canada. All those I think still play in at the same rate. So there is that hesitancy because of misinformation or maybe the space of maybe still not trusting the medical profession. Because a lot of folks who have maybe engaged with the medical profession, especially maybe our trans-identified folks, often have some precariousness that has come with it. And so now thinking about having to go and put themselves in front of medical people again is holding back a little bit. But I don't think that there's a substantial difference from people not from the queer community.
Yeah, I know sometimes too, I've had my fair share of people saying things, and I'm like, okay, come on. I govern the hospital, I know, I hear from doctors, I get updated on COVID, right? And it's so important for us to all do our parts, right? But I understand, I guess what I'm trying to say is I understand in regards to being scared or having concerns. What can you say to those who may have concerns to help them understand the importance of getting the vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person who always believe it's your choice to do what you need to do. But I think just, again, listening to the people who know this stuff, our head doctors, those kind of people, and understanding what the repercussions are if you don't get it, right? So,
Yes.
and then if you have concerns, calling in, you can call into a health place to ask the question, so you don't have to go see someone. You can call in and say, hey, these are my hesitations. This is what I want. And really do the research to find out, what is truth and what is not truth, right? Because we know there's so much non-truth out in the internet, right? It's just about going to the right spaces online, like to the health departments, to find out what the true information is, and just keep encouraging people that we don't want them to be sick, and but those people who are vaccine hesitant overall, there's nothing we can do about that. There's always going to be a portion of our community that's going to be, and that's their choice to do that, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it's so, well, I'm a firm believer that everyone is entitled to decide on what goes in their bodies, right? But I think it's key for us to get educated in regards to what your options are, so you can make an informed decision for you and your family. Are most individuals' identities the same as what is on their photo ID? What challenges do you think that could cause, especially when they go to get the vaccine?
Yeah, so this is really a lot about folks who identify as transgender, and oftentimes, especially not oftentimes, there's a lot of youth who don't have the access to be able to change their name and gender to match who they are in their soul. Maybe parents won't do it. Maybe they just don't have the money, whatever those barriers are. And even for people who are above youth, like, are in their adulthood, maybe they don't have the ability to change. Maybe they're still, not out. So what happens is we go, I mean, I recognize that there is space that we don't have to have an OHIP card right now to go to get your vaccines in some spaces, but they do often require you to show some sort of ID from where you're located, because of this all hotspot and all these types of things. So the problem is when it doesn't match, it makes people hesitant to go, because, if I went and my ID didn't match like how I look and all that, they ask you, I've seen it. It's like they look at your card, they look at you, they ask you to identify yourself. And so, that puts the person in a big space, because now they're having to look at like how they were identified, at birth, rather than how they identify now. So, and then, there's people around. And so it makes it very precarious to do that. So there is some space in there, what I like, it's part of our system right now, right? So there's a bigger, broader picture. And again, I think this is part where we can maybe learn from this. How could we do this better than asking people, hey, are you, I'm just saying, Jane, rather than are you Joe, right? Like, why don't we just say, can you just go ahead and confirm this information for me? And again, it's difficult, right? Because everybody has to come with lots of education.
What's one thing you can say to staff members at the vaccination clinic to do to make things a little bit easier for those individuals who may find themselves in that situation?
Yeah, I think, again, it's always difficult, because when we identify people all the time, right? Even myself, I do this work. I am a person of a trans identity. I walk down the street, I start nailing people, like male and female. I mean, my brain does that. All our brains do that. So I think that what happens is that we have to be educated and understand that sometimes people don't always look like maybe their name does, right? And so, there's that space in there for people that they could have been educated, and they take the ID and they don't raise their eyebrows. They don't question, they don't have that questioning face, right? It's more like, okay, great, here's this person, they're presenting this health card. We can ask them, is this who you are? Great, thank you very much, and move on, right? And I think it's around, having people understanding that not everybody's ID always matches how they look, right?
Tell us about the mentorship camp.
Okay, great. Yes, so great highlights. So last year, so it's called Camp Rainbow Phoenix. It's actually been around, I think this is like technically the 12th year. So last year we had to go and do online. This year it's very popular. We're actually running camp 2 times. We decided not to try to go back in person because we weren't sure about what protocols could be in place. So we have one coming up in 2 weeks, and then we have one in August. It is 50 youth per camp. With mentors in there, and it's a leadership camp for youth. So they learn about, we teach them about history, we teach them about how do they cope, how can they become leaders in the community, and support others. And so it's 3 days of online. Right now, currently we have folks from 3 different provinces, so Ontario, Nova Scotia, and BC right now. And they're going to come to this camp and they learn all kinds of things. We do with a partnership with ACDR, or AIDS Committee of Durham Region. And so we've been running this camp. And so we have history from Robert McLaughlin. We have the living room. So it's another community place that actively involves the Pride community. And we do some crafts. We have campfires. And so they really learn and grow about how to be leaders and move things forward, even in their schooling, when they go back to school in the fall. And it's for 13 to 17-year-olds, all free. They can join up online at PFLAG-DurhamRegion.com. And it's free to campers, and they get this great kit of all kinds of fun stuff and information. So highly recommend it. And they can be identified, they can identify themselves in the community, or they can be an ally to the community to come.
Yeah. In all communities, we noticed that domestic violence increased. What did you notice in the 2SLGBTQI community?
Yeah, I mean, I think as in all communities during this time, we've seen an increase, and specifically, in partner violence. I haven't seen any particular studies done on this yet. And so I can only assume that it's going to be at least at, or perhaps even above, because again, people are stuck in homes, so they can't move out of, right? So before, when people were in a bad relationship, they could go find housing. And right now, housing is unavailable because no one's moving, right? So yeah, I haven't seen any particular statistics, but I do know it's happening.
The big question, did you get the vaccine?
Yes, of course. I'm very lucky. Belonging to the profession that I do, I was actually able to access it a little bit early because of some of the outreach work I do in public. Yes, so I am fully vaccinated.
Great. That's all the time we have for today's episode of Health 180 with Carrie and Fan on Rogers TV. Thank you to Jake for joining us. Thank you to Susie Share. And thank you for joining us. And remember, together we're stronger.